Welcome to Hope for Med.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Hope for Med podcast. I am your host, Dr. JB, and today's featured guest is Dr. Boyce Fish. He is an emergency medicine physician living in Idaho and currently serves as a life coach, helping physicians take back control of their life. Welcome to the show, Dr. Fish.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you doing today?
I am well. How are you?
It's an amazing day to be alive.
Indeed. So, Dr. Fish, can we please start from the beginning? Can you share with my audience your origin story?
Yeah. Board certified emergency medicine, but I guess it started, I had a non-traditional route into medical school. I had finished a bunch of core sciences and I had a family during my entire undergraduate. I work, then I'd go to school, and then I'd work, kind of that. So I had 4 kids, actually, when we enrolled in medical school. It took me a couple of rounds of applications because I had to go and get a master's and show that I could get a good GPA because I wasn't really super focused on that prior to that. But then I just felt called to be a physician and took the road less traveled for sure. I went to medical school with 4 kids.
Wow. How old were your kids when you started medical school?
Started medical school, they were 3 to 13.
Oh, that's a spread.
Yeah. So, all the way up to the preteen. So, teenager. Yeah. So life was good. That was my outlet during medical school. Everybody else liked to party after tests. I would go hang out with my family. It's pretty cool. So, medical school. Non-traditional was obviously different for me than other people. It was good. I found my learning methods and kind of zoomed right into it. I'd been serving as a med tech before that. So I worked in the ER as an ER tech, and then throughout the hospital as a CNA. So I scrubbed into operating cases, all kinds of cool stuff. So I kind of had a really nice medical background by the time I went to school. Following school, did my audition rotations around the country, and ended up at Grandview Emergency Medicine in Dayton, Ohio. Amazing program. It's a very small osteopathic program, but really was the right fit for me. And enjoyed my time there. In fact, I ended up staying on as faculty. I was assistant program director for emergency medicine for a while. When I left that position, I also was clinical faculty for the Wright State Boonshoff School of Medicine, emergency medicine residency, and medical students there as well. Enjoyed teaching, love teaching. That's been my jam from the very beginning. After that, we ended up moving out to Idaho, and that's where I'm currently at now.
Mm-hmm. So why Idaho? And where are you from originally?
Well, that's, So I guess started out, I grew up in California. I took a swim scholarship to University of Wyoming, met my wife there. We got married during my sophomore, her freshman year. Kids, we went all the way through school with kids. Both of us finished with multiple degrees. So started in California, went to Wyoming. I've lived in multiple states at this point. But why Idaho? Well, out west was where her family was from. My brother-in-law is also emergency medicine, so I came out here to work with him and settle my family where we'd be near relatives, because when we were in Ohio, we were near nobody. So it's kind of nice to be around family.
Okay, perfect. So how has Idaho been?
Idaho is amazing. I love the mountains. I love the weather. I love the outdoors. That job was interesting. It was probably not a good fit for me in retrospect, but I came on as a partner track. And to get here, I worked for a major medical organization who won't be named. And despite working all the extra hours that I ever worked for them, being one of the most flexible guys on the schedule, there was a 2-year sign-on bonus limit. And when I said I was leaving, they were pretty upset. And they said, well, we don't care if you've worked more than the hours, and unless you work the number of hours to the end of your August shift, and I was leaving in May, then you have to pay us back the sign-on bonus. And truly, I probably should have just paid him back the sign-on bonus, but I decided to work it out. And so I was working 6 and 7 days a week. I think I went on one stretch of 38 days without a day off, 12-hour shifts, and worked my way out. But that was the very first time that emergency medicine didn't feel right, that I felt burnt out. I'd worked myself into oblivion. Emergency medicine has always been my personality. I'm ADHD. I love the teamwork. I love the change of pace, snotty nose, sprained ankle, code blue, right? That's just what we do. Mm-hmm. And it fit me. I was able to juggle multiple plates and keep things going. When I moved out here, I had a little bit of time off trying to rest and recover. And in June, I started my current position here in Idaho. At that time, I was still not super excited to go back to the ER, which is really weird for me, right? This is my jam. I love the ER. My wife asked me when I came out here, what do you want to do? Do you want to, because, it's an independent Democratic group and there's lots of different places you could go as far as administration and education, all kinds of stuff. And it's I just want to be an ER doctor. It's kind of nice to just see patients and treat them. Then what happened there was kind of what I would call a series of unfortunate events. The first one was my very, very first shift. I came on and the doc I was on, not coming out of residency, he's like, you're a seasoned doc. You can do this. Why don't you take the floor? It's nice and slow. You can take care of things. And so I jumped right in. It was this old archaic med system. So I was kind of struggling, trying to figure out what to do. I had a scribe there trying to help me. I was having to ask him a lot of questions. And then stroke comes in, right? And we get the call and their protocol, not having been there, I didn't know this. I've never had to pick up a phone for a patient that I don't even know anything about. They said code stroke, gave an age and a female. That's all I knew. And they handed me the phone. I'm like, what are you doing? I have to see the patient before I can talk to the doctor. And that turned out to be a difficult interaction with a nurse. But, a couple months later, I get my 1 month review at about 3 months. And they're like, yeah, you had this difficult interaction with a nurse, but she really likes you now. That's hard to come back from. I'm like, well, it's because I'm a nice guy, but the difficult interaction is because I was just thrown to the wolves. There's another shift a little while later. Somebody signed out a patient who should not have been signed out. And had I known then that the new guy doesn't have to get dumped on, I probably should have said, no, you stay and finish this one. I ended up disciplining the patient with all the protocols and return precautions and all the things. She had follow up with her doctor the next morning. But then that got sent to case review because she came back. And if you bounce back within 36 hours by protocol, it's a bounce back and then your case gets reviewed. And they said, well, you didn't actually contact her doctor, so we're reviewing you as, insufficient. I'm like, what? Even though I did everything right. And here's the literature. This is how you treat this kind of patient. And they said, yep. I was like, oh, that's awkward. And then, I kind of helped them bring up the new med system, Epic. And we go on and there's a cardiac alert that comes in and it's a poor weather thing. The helicopter flies around towards Sun Valley. We're in the Boise area and picks up this patient. And it's bad. She's hypotensive, bradycardic. When she comes in, we're like, oh, this is not good. And they sent us the report. It's an NSTEMI. It didn't transmit, so we didn't get that until we got there, but we knew it was a cardiac alert. They'd called, or not an NSTEMI, but a STEMI. And so they called the STEMI and so I'm treating the patient and I'm getting her fluids, thinking about pressors, started the anticoagulants, getting her ready for lab. I'm like, why haven't I talked to the doctor? They're like, well, we didn't page them. And it was, again, the new EMR, the tech didn't know how to do that. Well, then the doctor got freaked out, called a MIDAS alert, which is our MIDAS meeting, which means I'm meeting in front of the entire safety council for the hospital, administrators, nursing administrators, cardiac team, ER team. There's a couple of my ER guys that were there with me. They were all assuming I hadn't paged the doctor. I was like, I don't know why I'm here. And then the tech stands up in the meeting. She goes, I don't know why you're all mad at Dr. Fish. I didn't know how to page them because of the new EMR. So I'm off the hook. But then again, I look bad, right? And so these things are starting to stack up. I found out there's another case in review, and I knew about that case. Patient wanted to be discharged, and I'd kind of gotten their labs somewhat normal. They were kind of end-stage organ failure in multiple places. And, you fluid them up for the lactate, then you drop the lactate, but you increase the BMP, whatever. So send them home, and they bounced back, of course. Of course, they were placed on a DNR, and they passed a little while later, but the patient was sick of being in the hospital, so I let them go home. So I knew I was going to get another bad review. And come November, these things have kind of started to add up, and I kind of feel like I'm under a lot of pressure, a lot of scrutiny. And I realize this. So another well-meaning but probably poorly informed doctor took my wife and I out to dinner and said, you had the one case review that went badly, and this other one's not likely going to go very well. I've read the case. He goes, if you have one more within this calendar year, they're going to terminate you. And I'm like, okay. And for the first time now, like right as I'd started to get in my groove, and Epic was something I was really familiar with and things were going well, now I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. Like, what patient do I discharge that comes back that then causes a case review that, even though I do everything right, causes them to rate me poorly, and then I'm out of a job? And so, I'm kind of just walking on eggshells. January the 4th, I end up with a patient that comes in, influenza. She had been seen at an urgent care, diagnosed with influenza, given Tamiflu, that thing that works maybe not very much at all. And then, so the next day she was still feeling bad. So she went back to the same urgent care. She got a chest x-ray. She got a Z-Pack and steroids, sent her home. I'm like, okay, now she has 3 things that don't work, but okay. Then on the 3rd day, she goes and she's like, okay, this urgent care isn't taking care of me. I'm going to go to the ER. She goes to the other system, the competing system's ER, and they get the $1 million workup. CAT scans with contrast, blah, 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 and labs. Everything is 100% stone cold normal, including vital signs. She's not happy with what happened there, so she comes to see me. Last patient of the day, I spend probably an hour with the patient and her mom, and I give her some actually nebulized lidocaine. She's complaining of painful breathing, even though there's no respiratory distress. And that made her, of course, feel better, right? Took away the pain. Figured out how to put the code into the computer so that it could be ordered again. I discharged her home. I said, look, it's still influenza. And, you can come back. Now that it's in the computer, we can treat you the same way and you'll feel better. You can come back as many times as you need to. But your labs are normal, and they felt reassured, so they went home. So then it's our anniversary the next day, and 26th anniversary, and we're like, I have to work that day. I'm partner track, so I don't dare ask for my anniversary off. But I've got the following day off. We spend that skiing. I come home from skiing, and my brother-in-law, and we just live down the block from him, says, hey, can I come over? And he sounded kind of weird. I was like, yeah. He goes, that girl, do you remember that 19-year-old you saw with flu? I was like, yeah, I spent a whole bunch of time with her. He's like, she came back dead. Full cardiac arrest. She's on a vent. It looks really bad. And I was like, what? A 19-year-old girl, flu? And I was like, I was broken. There's all this pressure that's been building up. And in hindsight, if I'd been able to absorb those pressures that were building on me before, but I kind of broke. I had a 19-year-old kid who's now almost finished with his master's in engineering, and grandkids on the way and kind of a thing. And I just was picturing her family not having any of that, and broke. Like, I cried right then, like unabashedly. We reviewed the case. Everything looked good. Everything was done right. Of course, the case is going to get reviewed. I'm like, great, now what? So I worked the next couple shifts. She's still on life support. I go up to visit the family. Probably not advisable, but at the same time, I just wanted to tell them how sorry I was about their daughter. So I go up. I see her. Mom's a little bit hysterical. She was the one I dealt with before, but she's like normal. Like that's what you'd expect. Dad is sad, but accepts my condolences. Grandparents rip me up one side down the other. And just for the peace of the ICU, I go to the quiet room and let them tear me up and down. And after about 10 minutes, I'm like, I got to go back to work. And they're like, you're a terrible doctor and all these things. Well, then 2 days after that, I get my scheduled 6-month review. And, the review, I've been wandering around kind of in a fog the whole time. I'm very clearly depressed. Like there's no question. Like I probably shouldn't be at work. In a group that large with enough coverage, I should have just taken time off to recover. But that's hindsight. I go into my review and I walk in and they're like, yeah, this and that, and this, this metric and this metric. And, oh, by the way, we're really sorry about that case. How you doing? I said, this is what we do. We all get through this somehow. I'll get through it somehow. And they're like, well, we reviewed the case, and actually the head of pulmonary reviewed the case. You did everything 100% correct. Your documentation is immaculate, but the family's complained. And then I guess there was one more unfortunate event. I had a patient that had come to me at the end of September, and she'd been seen by a couple of different doctors who just kind of increased her pain medication, called it sciatica, called it back pain. And then she got to me, and of course that's a bounce back, right? In the ER, we talk about bounce backs. And so I was like, well, you're not getting out of here without something. Had ordered a CT scan. I didn't want to waste time on MRI at that point, but ordered a bunch of labs. First thing came back was her calcium was like 19. I was like, oh, yeah, now we're going to go a little bit deeper. And so she had really bad cancer. Held her hand while I gave the diagnosis, said, we're going to transfer you to this other facility that has our oncology team at it. Obviously this is really bad. It was up in her lungs, stage 4 endometrial is like the origin. She passed 2 weeks later. Well, her partner complained. And so I already had a complaint on file. So I got a complaint, 2 case reviews. And now this other patient is going to complain. And so they said, well, based on your 2 case reviews and the 2 complaints, the board's going to meet next week and they're likely going to terminate your contract. I'm like, that's great timing. I'm definitely feeling 100% right now. And, but I thought about it. I was like, this other place, they'll fly me back and forth to work. They'll put me up. I can just go work a week at a time and have lots of town time. It'd be great. So that was kind of my plan, but I was still just kind of down, and when the one partner had said, hey, they're likely going to terminate your contract, the other one had very gently said, well, that's not exactly how it goes. Cause he could probably read better in my face of just like kind of dying on the inside right now. So the next day I was just sitting there. I had my computer open. There was going to be a couple of charts I was going to polish up, and had a book to read, had some soccer recorded. I was going to watch some soccer, and my wife kind of kissed me on the head and said she loved me and she's going to go off with her sister to buy some furniture for my niece who was going to go to school here at Boise State. And they left, and that was like at 10 in the morning. And I don't know what I did for the next 4 hours. I don't remember, but I just felt this deep, dark, crushing pressure. And just all of a sudden, the only way out was to kill myself. And I just snapped. I grabbed a bottle of pills. She said, are you going to pick up our daughter? I'm kind of tied up here. I was like, no, you can. And then I turned off my phone. And I drove up the hills, or I sent her kind of a goodbye text, kind of a suicide note, and then turned off my phone. I drove up the hills, like literally 20 miles away up in the mountains. And I was like, well, that's not cool. I didn't leave anything for my kids. So I wrote a little note for my kids, loved them, et cetera. Sent that, turned off my phone again. I didn't want anybody finding me. And, this is where the series of fortunate events began. So a city police officer drives up, but he's out of his jurisdiction. So he's just sitting there looking at me. I've already done what I was going to do. I've taken a big old handful of pills, and I know it's lethal. Like, we're doctors. We know what to do. And so he's just sitting there looking at me. So I'm like, this is weird. I think he's here for me, but I don't know why or how. So I kind of drive away. And then my wife, despite being told to stay at the bottom of the hill, I had guns. She thought I was going to shoot myself. And of course, that's what she's telling police over and over again. He's going to kill himself. He's got guns. And so she's just dying. She's in a panic. Her sister's driving her around because she can't drive. They're both just, so they come driving up this dirt road and they kind of semi try to block me. And she jumps out of the car and tries to stop me. And I don't want to talk to her. Like, I'm broken on the inside. I'm done. I've checked out. So I kind of get past her. I go down the road. And here's the first mistake I made. A police officer, now a sheriff who has jurisdiction there, flips on his lights, turns his car across the road and tries to block me in. Well, it's Snowmageddon. We have piles of snow, more snow than we've had in 100 years. And I put my big old truck in 4-wheel drive, take it up through a big old snowbank, go around him. That doesn't make him very happy. He eventually gets turned around and starts following me. And so I'm just kind of meandering through roads. I'm like, looking behind me. I'm like, there's like 7 cop cars back there. So I'm like, pull over. I'm like, what do you want? They're like, we want to talk to you. I'm like, well, I don't want to talk. Would you have guns? I'm like, of course. You want them? Will you leave me alone if I give you my guns? No, we want you to get out of the car and talk to us. And at this point, my wife comes up, and since guns are involved, I have 3 pistols, 3 9mm, and 2 AR-15s pointed at me. And now she thinks I'm trying to die by cop. And so she's tripping out about that. And I don't see her, right? I haven't seen her since the beginning. They keep her held back. And then I drive away again. That was a big mistake because now I've pissed off not just one guy, I've pissed off everybody. So they block me in a little while later. And of course, tossed to the ground, tased, cuffed. I get a medical clearance sitting in the slushy road, literally sitting in the slush in the road, of a blood pressure cuff. And are you suicidal? Yes. You want to kill yourself? Yes. Okay. Paramedics leave. I get taken to jail. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You're not gonna, I'd asked to go to the competing ER because I don't want to deal with any of my partners or former, not partners, whatever. And I was like, they take me to jail. And supposedly I'm on suicide watch. They're like, I was sick and unsteady. They're like, why are you sick? I'm like, well, I've been up for like almost 40 hours now. How would you feel? Like, fine, go over there. And I remember laying down on a concrete bench thinking, this is it. And that's the last thing I remember for a couple of days, like 3-4 days. My wife, my sister-in-law keep calling the jail. He's an ER doctor. He knows how to do it. Have you checked on him lately? My sister-in-law called again at 2:45, and somehow that stimulated the nurse. I don't know if I'd been checked on before that. I've been face down on a concrete bench for 5 hours at this point, 6 hours. And so the nurse comes and checks me as I'm taking my last breath. Well, if you've been in the ER, you know what agonal breathing is. You know, my heart was probably already stopped. They start CPR. It doesn't come back. The paramedics arrive. I'm shocked. But I'm unresponsive. I guess I'm responsive to pain, but I'm posturing, like flexion, contraction of everything to pain, but not localizing the pain. And that was my best response in the ER. They did some scans. They did some labs. I mean, my lactate was 15 or 16. My BNP was jumped up. My troponin was jumped up. I was in acute renal failure. I think creatinine and BUN were like close to 4 and like 46 or something like that from a normal healthy guy just a few hours before. So I don't know how long I'd been down, but it was bad. They stick me in the ICU, but you know, like I said, as much as things were going south for me, the nurse happening in at that time, I mean, she had waited 5 minutes. I wouldn't be here. You know, they get me upstairs. Things are really bad. I'm on 3 pressors, maxed out. Nothing's responding. And it's really bad. My labs are getting worse, not better. They poured a bunch of fluid on me. So I guess my lactate had dropped down around 12 or something like that. But, they're still expecting me to die. My wife gets a call, come to the hospital, he's had cardiac arrest, that's where he's at now. So the family's all there. They can't see me because technically I'm still arrested. In fact, I have a picture of me cuffed to the bed, completely intubated and unresponsive without sedation. Like I'm checked out. There's nothing left. And so they're calling family from around the country to come in and see me. And my brother, the ER doctor, sitting there, and he and a very courageous intensivist are looking at me and they're like, well, he's got right heart strain on echo. Maybe he's just got a massive PE. Let's give him TPA. Well, after 15 minutes of CPR, TPA is a pretty courageous thing to do. No idea what the outcome of that's going to be. But it worked. My daughter found what I'd taken. They started doing some reversal things as far as that goes. TPA, and all of a sudden I rebound. But I end up being on a vent for the better part of 4 days before they extubate me. I don't have a lot of memories. I think I met with a psychiatrist at that point. He asked if I was still suicidal. And of course I said yes. But I was really groggy and not there. And it wasn't from sedation, although I had been sedated for a few days at that point, right? As they're kind of weaning me off of that. The first thing I remember is really waking up, and I had, several of my siblings, my father, my mother, my kids. I had 2 adult children that still lived in Ohio, had flown out. They were in disbelief. They're like, they're told to come fly out that I'm dying. They're like, nah, he's not suicidal. They didn't understand. They're like, he's just, maybe he just wants attention. Like that's not dad. He's Superman. He's gone through everything. There's nothing that can make him do this. Well, I wake up to non-judgmental. My wife was she had curated what was going to happen very well. She's like, everybody just love him. Nobody talk about it. And she just kind of created this environment of kind of love and welcoming. And I started to realize, I was like, ooh, I almost checked out of all of this. And that was a good place to start. I kind of knew the drill, right? Work in the ER. I know what a 72-hour hold is. I also know that if I check in myself, then I have a little more control over my situation. So I checked myself in, and I stayed for a little over 72 hours. But I'm watching my wife come visit me, and I'm realizing the damage that I've done, right? And when I started focusing externally on what was around me, it was a clear turnaround. And I should be clear, like for people who are depressed, of course, we're talking to you, right? And with COVID and everything happening there, that's a lot of people. But there's people who don't think that they're depressed. Well, that was me, right? I've seen the wellness lectures, whatever. I'm fine. I love my job. Everything's great. The people who think that they're not depressed and this doesn't apply to them, it most definitely does. I've never been depressed. I've never taken medications. Currently don't take antidepressants, don't need them. It was 100% job related. And it was pressure on pressure. And it's the same thing that's been happening with COVID, right? Like we're looking around, and the 300 to 400 docs per year has definitely accelerated. I don't know if we're ever going to get a clean number from that because of the way things are reported for physicians. But definitely suicide has been in the news more than it's ever been in the past. And if that's the case, then it has definitely gotten worse. Yeah. Super happy to be here. I had an anoxic brain injury. I think before I checked myself out of the psych facility, they'd done another MMSE on me, and I couldn't do serial sevens. My brain just was a little bit fizzled out still after being deprived of oxygen for who knows how long. But I'm excited to be here, and the message isn't without hope, right? I really feel like people who go through things like this, have a chance to bounce back. I know a lot of people don't want to share the story. I won't lie to you. There's a little bit of shame involved in this. I would rather pose naked for a magazine than talk about this openly with my name attached to it. But I also know that the story needs to be told, and that if that's my job, while I'm not letting my suicide define me, it is forever part of my story. And if I can help other people, that's what I need to do.
Thank you. It takes a lot of courage to be able to share your story. And, I thank you for sharing it here with us at Hope for Med.
Welcome.
Suicide amongst physicians is a huge, huge problem.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's a problem. Mm-hmm.
There's tons of risk factors for us. We talk about, there's a great book, Why Physicians Die by Suicide, from Dr. Michael Myers. And, he's worked with suicidal physicians. He's talked to survivors. And, he has some risk factors out there, perfectionism, holding ourselves to some sort of almost unholy standard, unattainable standard, right? As physicians, we look around, it's not the hundreds that we've saved. It's the one that we lost, right? We have this kind of standout personality. We've always excelled and done things well. And then when things start caving in, that starts to crush, right? And there's the sensitive physician. Most surviving family members would describe their lost ones as very sensitive. I spent an hour with that patient, like literally talking them down from, anxiety and stress and worry. I think physicians in general, another risk factor is like the narcissist, which I don't think fits the average physician. There's healthy narcissism, right? You can't even step in and take your board exam without a little bit of like, okay, I've studied, I'm ready, I'm gonna do this, right? You can't send a patient home ever unless you believe in yourself and your diagnosis. So that's a little bit of narcissism. But the unhealthy narcissist, and we all know the specialties that kind of attract them, those guys are usually more fragile on the inside. There's the wounded healer, the people who get into medicine because of something that happened in their life, something they're trying to fix. The orthopod who was the injured athlete kind of a thing. And then Dr. Thomas Joyner is quoted in that book as there's like the lethal trifecta. And if you meet all three things, one, I felt like I was a burden to my family. That was exactly what I wrote in my suicide note. I'm sorry I've drug you across the country multiple times for medical school, for residency, but after one last hurt, I won't hurt you anymore. And then the feeling of not belonging, right? You feel like you don't belong. Well, I'm getting kicked out of an ER group, even though I know I'm a good doctor. I've been told I'm a good doctor. I've practiced next to other academic clinical physicians and been told I'm a good doctor. But that's not what's happening here. I'm having my sense of tribe taken away. And then if the individual has the ability to carry it out. Most physicians, we know it doesn't take much to carry something like that out. So yeah, lots of warning signs. We've got to figure out how to stop the suicide rate. I guess my message for that is start the conversation for yourself, for others. Nobody ever asked if I was suicidal, and I wasn't at the time. But people did frequently ask, and this is what everybody did right around me. How are you doing? Checking in with me. I mean, I'm a normally chipper guy at work. Like, I'm happy to see the next patient. I'm happy to help the nurses out. I'm happy. I don't want to ever yell at the nurses, but I was just dragging my feet. I was wearing a pair of cement shoes. But, they did a survey. I think, I forget who did the survey, but it was published on one of the Medscape articles. They surveyed 1,300 physicians. So this is prior to COVID. This is 2018. And out of 1,300 physicians, 9% had actively, I forget the number for depression, but 9% actually said that they were depressed and had considered suicide. And 1% of 1,300 people had attempted. That's bad. And that's prior to COVID. That I've actually been approached. I've lectured for residencies and some national meetings and stuff, regional ER meetings and stuff. And every single time I've lectured, somebody has come up and talked about themselves. And, your story was me, kind of a thing. As my previous residents and previous residency classmates and medical school classmates found out that it was me, to a T, every single one of them were stunned. I was not the depressed guy. I was the unstoppable, put another roadblock in front of me, I'm just going to smash through it. But everybody has a breaking point. And if you don't start the conversation, if you don't talk about those feelings, they build up. You can put them in a shoebox and file them away. But if you keep doing that, eventually they come out way stronger than what you had before. And if you start talking about it, if you recognize that people are down, if people aren't acting right, if they have hopelessness, if they have withdrawal, if they're talking about death or suicide, if they're giving stuff away, if you notice they're looking for access to things like buying a gun or something like that, or they're acting recklessly, increased alcohol and drug use, you need to be open. You need to be candid. You need to ask them, are you suicidal? Contrary to popular opinion, evidence shows you can't make somebody suicidal by asking them about it. You can't. That's not the way it works. And then you try to be supportive. And you don't ask the question like, you're not suicidal, are you? You're like, have you thought about harming yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? And then you need to be, even though it might slap you in the face, like you're stunned, you need to be supportive. Well, how can I help? What can we do? Ask them if they have a plan in mind. This is what we do in the ER every day. Do you have a plan? They're at higher risk if they do. You can get them help, right? If you can't stay with them, then you need to get them checked in. As much as they're going to hate you for it in the moment, you need to get them checked into the hospital. Get support from friends and family if you can't stay with them. If they have a mental health professional, get a hold of them. Let them know what's happening. There are so many things that you can do to kind of prevent it. In the end, you can't take responsibility for what they do. That's not what I'm saying. But imagine if you didn't say something. I had 2 months out, still really in bad shape, chest compressions, had dislodged cartilage and stuff. And yeah, I'd lost a whole bunch of weight. I was still looking pretty bad, but we had just like an open house for some of the nurses that I'd worked with. And I didn't realize the secondary harm to them, because they all felt bad because they felt like they hadn't asked. You're not alone. Start the conversation. You can be peer support for somebody, and just venting frustrations and venting sadness and allowing some of those emotions out instead of locking them in is going to put you in a better place, or your partner or somebody else in a better place. So I guess that's the message, is you're not alone.
That's a powerful message, because so many people, so many healthcare professionals do feel alone, isolated, like there's something wrong with them for feeling the way that they do, or responding the way that they respond to different situations. And then externally, they look at their colleague from across the way and they seem like they have it all together.
And like I said, I have really close friends. I have a couple of really close friends. I was talking to one of them. He was driving into a shift and he was kind of a little bit distracted. At that point, a little bit burnout. Similar situations with his job as I had had. And he was a phenomenal clinician, but had, some patient complaint, some case review, whatever. And I got to the point and he goes, "Wait, what?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, I took a bunch of pills. I don't know why I'm here. Like my labs, other than people who live chronically with some of those acidoses, I shouldn't be here. You look at my labs, those are probably unsurvivable in most cases. Out of hospital arrest, what are the odds? Like super low." And he pulled over and he started crying. And he said, "Boyce, I had a gun in my mouth. I don't know why I didn't pull the trigger." And again, happy-go-lucky guy, not depressed, but the burdens that the job is placing on him. I mean, Jimmy over at the Physician Philosopher talks about medicine as a dumpster fire. And I don't know that he coined the term, but it's pretty accurate. I mean, we're just standing around watching the whole thing burn down around us. And, for-profit hospitals prioritizing profits over people, bad choices, not trusting physicians to make good clinical decisions, putting clinical pathways in. I can't tell you how many of those things I've seen come and go, time to pain medication for a long bone fracture, and then all different things that have come and gone. And you're just like, why aren't we just practicing medicine? Why don't you just trust us to do what we came here to do? The vast majority of us aren't here for money. We're here because we wanted to help people. That's our job. We help people. And if they would just trust us, it would get better. Instead, there's a coin that they've used, a term that they've coined in the military called moral injury. And it was PTSD cases that were refractory to standard therapy. And they realized that all of these cases had something in common. They had either done something that they thought was morally wrong, or witnessed something that was morally wrong, or had not acted in a way that they thought they should have. And, that one of the British journals, first time it started being relayed this way, said, "You have no right to co-opt that term. Medicine isn't like that." I'm like, clearly that dude's never worked in an ER, which is essentially a battle zone. And especially over the past few years with people getting cursed at and sworn at and spit on and all the crazy things that are happening to doctors. But you think about it, and moral injury really, having case reviews, even though I'd done things right, having complaints, even though I'd done things right, that's moral injury. And between that and, having overworked myself prior to that, I had kind of given myself a little bit of burnout. But if you coin the term moral injury, people are more likely to be like, yeah, the system's broken, not me. I talk about wellness as a 4-letter word. And only in this, clearly it's not spelled with 4 letters. But, you think about physician wellness, and that implies that we are all unwell. Are we? Or is the system broken? Are we being forced to do things that aren't correct? Well, you got to give that patient pain medication. Otherwise, they're going to complain. And if they complain, then the hospital gets raided. And literally, I have seen in a hospital system, an administrator on call be called down by the patient because the ER doctor said, "No, it's an ankle sprain. I'm not giving you narcotics." You can have ibuprofen and a walking boot and crutches, and we can take care of this like everybody else. And that administrator talked to the physician and said, "Why aren't you giving him pain medication?" "Because there's nothing broken, and this can be treated otherwise." And the family gets gift cards to a restaurant and another physician's called in to give them pain medications. What the heck? I mean, the inmates are running the asylum. So they talk about physician wellness, and there's been so many wellness programs. I think they're getting better now, but, practice mindfulness and deep breathing for 2 minutes during your shift and you'll feel better. Really? How about you just give me enough nurses? Or how about, since I know you're a private equity group trying to make money, but how about we staff another physician since I'm seeing 30 patients in a shift? Or get me a mid-level that can take some of that pressure off. And so physician wellness, I mean, during COVID, story of they're down a physician, a mid-level, and multiple nurses because of COVID. And what does the administration do? The wellness committee brings them pizza. Really? That's going to make them well. Maybe just greasy and fat. So, yeah, we are the most resilient people. Mm-hmm. Made it through medical school, made it through residency. We've just got to find our way back. And I'm so happy that you're out there podcasting. And I'm happy that you have medical students and residents that are listening so that they have an idea of what's coming.
I say entering healthcare with eyes wide open. That's something I didn't have when I was watching Grey's Anatomy.
So was my wife. She thought, sure, I was going to hook up with a nurse in an elevator. I'm like, we don't have time for that. I don't think you understand. I trained in the day where we didn't have patient caps. The one patient cap I had was at a internal medicine. I got pushed into it because they wanted to keep the rotation open, but everybody hated it because you just got worked. And as a medical student, you were capped during your 24-hour call at 10 admits. And that was the only cap I ever saw. Everything else was see as many as you can, do as much as you can. I remember back in the day when we were doing paper charts, you would literally sign as a medical student an order for whatever. And the only thing that was required is the resident that was supposed to supervise you would come around and countersign it later. Like, we were practicing medicine back then. And it was not Grey's Anatomy. And there's not a bunch of beautiful people running around. There's a bunch of bedraggled, beat up, drug out, but that's where I think things can change. Like, as an individual, you have to take time for yourself. And that's one of the things that I talk about in my life coaching is managing circumstances. Well, there are circumstances, right? You're a resident. Maybe your Q3 call, or do they even do that anymore? I mean, that was our trauma call, was Q3 call, right? Every third day you're there for 30 something hours. And, that might be a circumstance, but then how you think about that call changes how you feel. And so during my life coaching, it's like, yeah, you're miserable. Do you like that? No. Well, why don't we redefine what the circumstance actually is? Like, fact from fiction. What is the actual story? You're a resident, you're on Q3 call. How do you want to think about that? You want to think that you've only got, 4 weeks of your 6 week or 1 week left? How does that make you feel? Well, like, I have hope. Well, why don't we focus on that? And changing people's perspective from the inside out, just by changing their thoughts, completely changes how they feel and then how they act. And I feel like this is a place that coaching is starting to make inroads for physicians, for medical students, for residents. It has a lot of power to bring back your resiliency. Really, resiliency that got beat out of you one way or another.
Yeah, I think along those lines, what you just said perfectly aligns with the mission of Hope for Med, and especially with the potential for coaching and the importance of mindset. It's extremely, extremely important, because once you change your mindset, you regain your locus of control. You regain your power. So many of us feel hopeless, helpless. And the truth is, you're not.
Not at all. And it's just finding that medium. I mean, it's not Pollyanna tiptoeing through the tulips. Real stuff happens. But I really feel like if I had a coach during those times to kind of walk me through the processes, well, does that, I mean, you're making it mean that you're a bad doctor, or you're making it mean that they don't like you, or you're making it mean, is that actually true? Or is that something that you're thinking? And once you define fact from fiction there, you change how you think about it. And if I'd offloaded some of those pressures, then truly I don't know that I would have snapped on that case. And that's, again, you're not alone in this. You got to talk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, with the offerings of Hope for Med is, it's a place where you can come to release. So I talk about the 3 R's, right? Engage in the 3 R's. And what are those 3 R's? Well, one is release. In the very beginning, I used to refer to Hope for Med as a pop-off valve, right? Just someplace, the pressure's building up. Oh, my pop-off, okay. Like I can go back into this battle and keep at it, right? Both of us work in the emergency room. When do you have time to debrief on anything, right? The waiting room is filling up, patients are after you for a variety of things. Doc, I need pain meds. This family's calling, like you step out of the room, you get pulled in a million different directions, right? And then when your day is done, what do you want to do? Do you want to hang out in the ER and, decompress? No, you want to get out of there. You just want to leave and you want to forget about it. And you don't want to even talk about it when you get home, right? And then you sleep. And if you're working a stretch, you wake up and you do it again, right? And so I realized that there wasn't this place where, when I'm ready to debrief or process or whatever, according to my schedule, where can I go? Who can I talk to? And so that's why Hope for Men was created, to be this, and then again, as an ER doc, one of the things that I hate is, oh, I can meet with you every Monday at 3, right? And
but I work every 3rd Monday, right?
Exactly, right? Yeah. Or maybe I do want to meet up because I'm getting off at 2, but a code comes in, and I'm not able to leave when I'm supposed to leave, right? When I'm scheduled to leave, for whatever the reason may be. And so, you need that flexibility in there so that we don't want to add more pressure to the pressure that's already there, right? So we needed to have something that's available. It's just available for you when you need it, when you want it, 24/7. And so that's what Hope for Med, we're going to be launching soon, but that's what it's going to offer. It's through the lens of an ER doc, that this was created. But, going along with what you were saying, it's so true. It's so true that a lot of the times the healthcare professional doesn't have this diagnosis of, major depression disorder or anything like that, right? And like you said, you weren't, diagnosed or feeling super depressed before, and you're not on medications after, right? It was just this period where the pressure was building. You're like in a pressure cooker, right? It kept building and building and building until you acted. Yeah. And I'm so, so happy to know that you were found. You were surrounded by so many people who loved you and kept trying to intervene. And even after you were arrested and like, oh, the guns are out, they were like, no, keep an eye on him, right? Because there are so many people who loved you and love you, right? And those same people were there before. But sometimes when we get into this dark place, you forget about all the support that's there and all the love that you have, right? And sometimes you just don't feel like people understand, can truly relate, right? So that's why, with Hope for Men, it's for healthcare professionals, right? Because I completely understand what you're saying to me. I completely understand your story. I won't say 100%, right? I will never say 100% because, of course, we never can say 100, but I follow you 95% of it at least, right? Because we've gone through the same hoops.
I would be shocked if you say you didn't have some of those stressors and feelings in your life. I'd be stunned.
Oh my goodness, of course, right?
I'd be like, where do you work? I want to work there.
Right.
Because that's not how it goes. I did have a perfect job. They closed that hospital. But I worked inner city in Dayton, Ohio, and I loved it. Those were my people. They didn't have doctors sometimes, or they didn't understand why they were on medications. And I got to teach them and I got to help them. And I love my people. Mm-hmm. And they would tell you that. My patients would tell you that. I mean, a few of them, obviously pain meds, whatever, but the vast majority would tell you that they knew that I cared. Mm-hmm. And I had a case where somebody had filed a complaint with the NAACP that I was a racist and this and that. I think it was the COO of the hospital was also Black, came in, did his research, and then he approached me. He's like, we've got this letter. I was like, yeah, I heard about it. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm not going to change the way I practice. I love working here. I love helping people. If somebody thinks I'm a racist, I don't know what to do about that. And he goes, well, I've done my homework. He goes, if this letter from this lawyer representing the NAACP goes any further, we are putting our lawyers behind you. You don't have to worry about it. Mm. Because it was obvious. Like, I loved my job. I loved my people. I loved working there. And, somebody's throwing around the race card on me. That was the perfect job for me. Mm-hmm. I was working with my people, for people who appreciated care. I loved that. It was not quite as good as serving a medical mission. I've done a few of those down in Haiti and Croatia, and I've done some mission work, and that is truly rewarding. But you can't do that forever because it's free. In fact, you're usually paying money to be there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I'm glad that I'm glad that you're out there for people. I'm glad that you have an audience of people that have access to hope. Because really that was the absence of hope was where I sat.
So what made you decide to transition into life coaching?
It's kind of a long story, but, I had shared my story multiple times and I'd seen the effect of it, both with the initial blog that was on Kevin MD, Pamela Weibel wrote up kind of my story with a little bit of, I guess she took a few liberties with it, but at the same time, it was a well-written story that kind of touched people. And it was really obvious that it did. And then I was approached by people who knew that story was me. And they said, we want you to talk to our residents, and then more residents, and then a whole state's worth of residents. And then, a national meeting for obstetricians and gynecologists. And every time I've done that, I've been overwhelmed of people who wanted to talk about their story, mm-hmm. of their mentor who just committed suicide, of their friend who just did that, their family member, nonstop. Mm-hmm. And so much so that I told them at the conference, I was like, well, when is my presentation? What does the rest of the day look like? Because I'm going to tell you, it's hard for me to get away from people. They want to talk. And that's what I'm there for, is to talk. So my wife was after we'd done a few of these lectures, she's like, you should be a life coach. And, she's sending me these podcasts. And I was like, yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm like, this might sound bad, but like, it's kind of a girls' club. Yeah. So a lot of female life coaches out there. There's not a lot of guys. And I said, I don't see any. Well, and then she sent me one that was from a doctor's panel, also all female at that point. And then she sent me one from a men's panel, from men's coaching. I was like, wait a minute. There aren't enough male life coaches, and there aren't enough male physician life coaches, right? And from the life coach school where I certified, I think there's over 280 physician coaches now that have gone through certification. And the vast majority of them in some way are reaching back out to physicians. Some of them focus on finance, some of them focus on various aspects, and clearly burnout, moral injury is kind of my focus. I want to help people. I feel like if my story is going to help people, then people will reach out. My people will find me. And I have not done any advertising for my clients. It's been word of mouth. And people have found me and wanted to be coached and needed to be coached. And I've seen phenomenal results, right? And if you talk to some of those 280 something physicians that are also coaching, you will have story after story after story about lives just massively changing. Mm-hmm. Massively changing. And that's the goal. Is I'm not here to talk people in or out of medicine. That is your choice. But if you're going to say goodbye to medicine, let's make it a goodbye. Make sure you're doing it for the right reason. Make sure that the facts are separated out from the thoughts and the feelings. And if you don't want to if you cannot see a way back to what you envisioned as a physician, then let's find something else for you to do, because there's plenty of things to do for physicians. And, if you do find your happy place and realize, maybe this is just a malignant job, despite what some people might think, that was definitely my situation here. That might make some people mad, but it was very malignant. My brother-in-law, before I came out here, compared it to the firm, and just how treacherous it was going to be. And I was like, yeah, I can do it. I've done hard things before. I went to medical school with kids. Come on now. Before I was out of residency, I had a kid in college. I can do hard things. Yeah. Well, sometimes, but yeah, that's where life coaching went. Is I felt like if that story was that powerful, then people needed to be coached. And there's a lot of people that want to talk to me because I'm that guy. And when I say that guy, let's put air quotes around it. That guy is the guy that is the kryptonite to doctors' invincibility, right? I'm proof that doctors aren't Superman. And since I've already done the worst thing, and I haven't run into any of my clients that have gone as far as I went, but I know some of them have thought about it. But since I've done that, they feel open to talk to me about what's going on for them. Because I've already done, it's easier to talk to a guy that, has been around the block, so to speak.
You were given a second chance.
100%.
Whatever the reason was. And, right now, listening to your story, I'm realizing that you are providing, unlimited amount of good in this world. You were doing it already before this incident. And now you continue even afterwards. It's just on a different, deeper, more profound level.
So here's the thing. Let's say you are a burnout physician. If I change your perspective on life, let's say that you find your happy place again and you're working again, how many people does that affect? Every single nurse and tech that you work with, every single patient you see from now on, affecting one person has a watershed effect of what it changes. Not to mention, if you can just avoid a few of these 300 to 400 prior to COVID numbers of people dying every year, that's a medical school class and then some every single year is dying. We don't have unlimited numbers of physicians. And with a number of physicians leaving medicine increasing at a breathtaking rate, just helping a few of them come back or leave happy, however they want to get to it, just helping those people. That's been my goal.
And how long does it take to make a physician?
How long? Well, when you're about 30, you're a doctor, right? Mm-hmm. Like it, if you're trying to get people to train in a profession, I have no idea what the admission number is going to look like after COVID, but nobody wants to be a doctor after COVID, right? After seeing what the doctors went through. But, 4 years of medical school, 4 years of residency. And that's before you already did 4 years of undergrad, if you took the shortest route. So
how long does it take to lose them?
There's people quitting after a year. I mean, and in the case of suicide, it can be a matter of months.
Or
6
seconds.
months.
In the case of suicide, it's seconds, right?
Yeah.
But, so it takes 30 years to make one and seconds for them to die. So the significance of this conversation and conversations like this cannot be underestimated. When I came up with the whole concept of Hope for Med, I thought, if this podcast makes it to the ear of even one healthcare professional who, was contemplating suicide, and it contributes to them changing their mind when they realize that, oh, I don't have something inherently wrong with me, I'm not alone. If this podcast can do that for one person is enough.
That's what I say every time I lecture. And I'm always nervous and I'm always ashamed. And I shouldn't be, right? But it doesn't change the fact, I've done a lot of thought work and a lot of coaching on this, self-coaching and talking to my coach about this. But every single time I've spoken, it's not one person. It's not one person that hears the story and it affects them. It's dozens. It's everybody in the room. That last one in Texas a couple weeks ago, people were dabbing their eyes. I had everything. I looked like I had everything and I threw it all away. And then the story about, my family and the secondary harm and all of the things, it's gut-wrenching and gives you perspective. And I think in some small way gives people hope. But in the biggest way, it starts the conversation. You're not alone. Might feel like it, but you're not alone.
If my listener wanted to find out more about you, how can they do so?
You can find me at my website. There's two ways to do it. The website is www.thelifecoachphysician.com, but it's probably easier. I've got another domain, Dr. Boyce Fish, DrBoycefish.com, that points right to it. They can reach out there and do a contact me thing from there. They can schedule a consultation call, which is 100% free. I actually offer a money back guarantee on all my coaching packages. They can find my story there. We're in the process of, I've got fancy microphones here, getting ready to start my own podcast. We're creating evergreen content that will eventually be sold as coursework. That will be a cheaper way to access coaching. I'm still trying to work out the details of how to deal with medical students and residents because it's a need. But at the same time, if I'm taking time away from other clients, then I do need to be reimbursed somehow. And I think the model is going to probably be group coaching, is offer people access to group coaching as medical students and residents at a much cheaper rate. So yeah, reach out if you want to talk. If you just want to chat with me for a free consult call, I'm always available. I have set times. You use Calendly. I do the same thing. they log in, they schedule a call, and we work things out.
I wish this podcast was being sponsored by Calendly. It's great.
It works really good. There's a couple of them out there, but.
So, in closing, do you have any pearls of wisdom you'd like to leave my listener?
Yeah. No matter where you are on the road to medicine, you do need to focus on what brought you there, what the goal was, and what your dream was. How did you want to practice medicine? And it's probably still available to you. And you're not alone. Like, everybody's struggling. The struggle bus has unloaded everybody. But at the same time, reach out, talk to somebody. It doesn't have to be me. There's other coaches out there. If my story does not resonate with you, there are dozens of coaches out there, and I can point you to other people if you need me to. But find somebody to talk to, because you do not want to be me, to be me, to be me.
This is hope for med, new day for med, for us, by us, and just for us. This is hope for med.